One of the very hardest things I have to do ahead of my talk is to give Valerie a talk title 2 weeks in advance of writing it. And for this one, when I was asked, I remembered a little plaque in my hairdresser's salon that says, "Good hair, it's not by accident, it's by appointment." So now you know where I got the title. The hard part was to come up with a talk for Palm Sunday that kind of reflected that title. So you're going to have to bear with me as I try to tie some things together. We're going to take a quick look back, as we did in the Daily Word already this morning, to about 2,000 years ago, a little more, when Jesus made his triumphant re-entry back into Jerusalem. The Jews were expecting a long-awaited Messiah, a king who would free them from the oppressive rule of the Romans. Many expected a strong warrior who would conquer the Romans and overtake them by force. But those who knew Jesus personally knew better. Even some of his followers were beginning to question his methods of pacifism and turning the other cheek. With their numbers growing to be pretty large at this point, many wanted him to demonstrate miracles and powers to convert non-believers so they could grow even larger. But Jesus knew what was to come all this week and how it was supposed to play out to accomplish his mission. So he rode in on a donkey or a colt, symbolizing peace, instead of on a horse, as a conquering warrior would. His believers worshiped him, and they welcomed him with palm fronds along the way. There was a dusty trail, and I'm sure the palm fronds settled some of that dust as the colt walked across. And they shouted, "Hosanna, Hosanna," in welcome. Jesus' life had been spent demonstrating the truth, loving, healing, encouraging, seeing the perfection in everyone he met. Think about that. This is how he performed miracles. He saw everything God had created as perfect in its truest form. And as he believed, it was made manifest. Isn't that wonderful? He saw the perfection, and it was made manifest. His mission was not to change the physical world, but to change mankind's spiritual world. Personal connection to God was not something that was a concept understood in that day. Oneness with God, that you were forbidden to say the name of God. It was a very distant relationship. But Jesus knew better. It's still not understood by very many of us today. We say the words, "The Father and I are one," but I believe when we truly know that to be our truth to the depth of our being, we too will be able to walk on water. I believe that. I believe Jesus knew that solid belief in the truth could create miracles. By the end of Jesus' ministry, some were frustrated because they wanted him to change the outside world. Take the power from the Romans and give it to us. We're the good guy here. Jesus hadn't managed to convince all his followers that changing outside circumstances doesn't change anything at all. It's an inner change that changes everything. The kingdom of heaven is within. As Eric Butterworth puts it, it's not our job to set the world aright, but to see the world rightly. So Jesus set the scene for Holy Week by humbling himself as he entered the city, by washing the feet of his disciples at the Passover supper, by praying alone in the Garden of Gethsemane, and by non-resistance during his trial and ultimate execution. Could he have thrown himself out of this scenario? Of course he could. Of course he could. But all of this was done so that he could demonstrate the eternity of life through resurrection. That wasn't a concept anybody understood then either. Eternity of life? When you died, you went to Sheol, a little shadowy place somewhere they imagined, and that was the end. But Jesus knew better. He understood the greater reality that was to be demonstrated. Was any of it accidental, or was it all by appointment? I was reading an article on how we create. I get all kinds of stuff on I treat my phone like a computer, and I scroll and I take a bunch of publications, but one of them was about how to create, and I'm interested in that. So it mentioned something I had never heard of by name called the double slit experiment. Now, I'm not an AI person, so I thought I'd check it out and see what this double slit experiment was about. So I fired up Grok on my phone. It's an app you can get, the Elon Musk Grok AI program. And I asked it about it. What's the double slit experiment? Well, it's a famous experiment in quantum mechanics circles, that demonstrates that matter and light can behave like both particles and waves, depending on how they are observed. For example, with light, a laser shines toward a barrier that has two parallel slits. Behind this barrier is a screen. If Newton was correct in his particle theory of light, you'd see two bright lights banded evenly on a screen directly behind each slit. Instead, you get an interference pattern alternating bright and dark bands across the screen, indicating that light acts as a wave. The darks and lights interference, creating an overlay where they spread out. The real surprise comes when you do the experiment with individual particles, like electrons, one at a time. If you fire electrons one by one through these double slits, you see each electron hit the screen at a seemingly random spot, like a particle. But after thousands of electrons, the hits build up to the exact same wavy interference pattern as with light. And for the final mind-bending, if you place a detector at the slits to see which slit each electron actually goes through, the interference pattern disappears. You get two bands on the screen, as if the electrons are ordinary particles going through one slit or another. The mere act of observing which path the particle takes collapses the wave-like behavior into particle-like behavior. This is called the observer effect in quantum mechanics. And we've all heard of that. The observed experiment may change results based on the observer's expectation. This proves it. Particles don't have definite paths until they're observed. Now, this is science. Now, even crazier are ongoing experiments where the decision to measure is made after the particle has passed through the slits. Particles don't have definite paths until observed, and the which path information destroys interference. Does that imply that what we see in our minds as real is real? Could our affirmations really be making a difference in our outcomes? Is anything an accident, or is everything determined by expectation, accident or appointment? I think Jesus might have had a thorough understanding of this principle when he told us to pray, believing, and it would be done. Think of that. Pray, believing, and it will be done. He knew all about this. What about these things and greater things than these shall you do? Well, we don't believe that. But Jesus did. He knew that if we believed it, we would see it. If our mind can change the results of a laser or an electron by simple observation, what potential does that imply? One of the regular emails that I get is from the late Christopher Chenoweth's organization called Positive Christianity. And you subscribe for free, and he says the only copyright he has is that you have the right to copy anything I print. So here goes. I copied it. Yesterday, it included a story that touched my heart. A first grade teacher gave her class a simple but meaningful assignment. Draw a picture of something for which you are thankful. Most of the children came from modest circumstances, but they still had something to be thankful for. They could appreciate their family or their pets, a toy, food. Douglas, however, drew something entirely different. Douglas was a different kind of boy, frail, withdrawn, often unhappy. While the other children ran and laughed at recess, he usually stood close beside the teacher. Behind his quiet eyes, one could sense a loneliness that few understood. When asked to draw something he was thankful for, Douglas drew a hand. Nothing else, just a hand. His unusual picture sparked curiosity among the other students and classmates. Whose hand could it be? A farmer's, one child guessed, because they give us food. A police officer's, said another, because they protect us. God's hand, someone else suggested, because God feeds and cares for us. The discussion continued until the teacher almost forgot the young man sitting at his desk very quietly. And when the class moved on to another activity, she knelt beside Douglas and gently asked, "Whose hand is it?" The little boy looked down and softly replied, "It's yours, teacher." She was suddenly flooded with memories, times she had taken his small hand in hers and walked him to the playground, times she had said, "Take my hand, Douglas, let's go outside," or "Let me show you how to hold your pencil," or "We'll do this together." Of all the things he could have chosen, Douglas was most thankful for his teacher's hand. Brushing away a tear, she returned to work, but she would never forget that moment. The story is about more than gratitude, which we know is one of the highest vibrational energies we can create. It's about influence. It's about teachers who teach. It speaks to parents who guide, friends and neighbors who reach out. It reminds us how deeply a simple gesture can matter, especially to the Douglases of the world. They may not always say thank you, they may not always show you, but they will remember the hand or the palm for Palm Sunday that reached out to them. The way the world is designed in God's wisdom never misses an opportunity to prove God, which can stand for good, orderly direction. I love that, as the Unity minister Matthew Long says. I'd never heard that. Good, orderly direction. If you don't like the name God for whatever reason, as some do not, good, orderly direction. It's the source. Can our mental intention change the energy particles enough to turn around the life of a young boy by the simple extension of our hand? Can putting our life fully in God's hands do the same for our life? In this year's Unity booklet for Lent, Release and Reimagine, Reverend Long says, Palm Sunday is a reminder for me to reimagine my life and to put myself in God's hands. Symbolically and literally, I let go, releasing my preconceived notions of how things should be. I surrender my selfish, self-centered, egotistical wants and wishes and let God be God in me. I place myself in the hands of God and pray, Thy will be done. Not my will, but Thy will be done. Today is a holy day. The place where you're standing or where you're sitting is holy ground. And right now you have the opportunity to be in heaven. Sometimes we have to give up the good for the better. Sometimes we have to give up knowing the relative truth to know the absolute truth of God's presence and His power active in our lives and our affairs. May this special day and all of Holy Week serve to remind us that the power of God is within every moment of every day. We are each right here in this moment, not by accident, but by appointment. God bless you.